Good morning. Okay, we're going to have to do a little better than that. Good morning. Thank you. So we are here at the University of North Carolina, and I'll take privilege being from the University of Kansas in how we compete with one another, both with basketball and basketball coaches. So we have given the University of North Carolina the best thing they have, which is Dean Smith. For those of you who didn't know, he is from the University of Kansas. All right, let's see if I can work this here. Do I just...
It's right there.
Okay. So thank you again, Dr. Danny and Dr. Jill. Appreciate you all allowing us to come and share just a little bit of our story and how we're engaged in this journey as it relates to cancer and metastasis. So as you see here, you can see what I will look like in another 30 to 40 years. This is my dad. My dad, God bless him, in October of this year will be 90 years young. And I got started on this journey because of my dad. My dad now will be a 13-year prostate cancer survivor. But what's interesting about my dad's story is that he was not diagnosed until he was 77 years old. If anyone knows that how cancer and the burden of cancer is in the African American community, oftentimes it is, once diagnosed, it's late stage, and often the prognosis is very poor. And so, let me back up. So again, as Jill mentioned, I'm a part of the Recruitment Innovation Center, which is out of Vanderbilt and Meharry, basically looking at clinical trials and minority participation in clinical trials throughout the country. We're a national advisory board that's looking and challenging researchers as they develop their particular clinical trials, how they are addressing their target populations. And so oftentimes what we have found is many of our clinical trial researchers are not successful in completing or meeting their population targets, oftentimes because they have not thought about or included those individuals who are participating in the concept and the developing of the clinical trial. And so we are encouraging and advocating for them to have patients, survivors at the table at the concept, as opposed to just when you want to complete a trial. I'll also talk a little bit about PIVOT, Patient and Investigator Voices Organizing Together. We are a group of survivors and co-survivors that have come together to develop a relationship between the academic researchers, the clinicians, and the providers of individuals with all different types of cancer. We have a patient leader team of about 20 or more individuals that have come together and try to encourage and increase the conversation between researchers and patients. And what we have learned, very interestingly, many of these researchers I know personally, having gone to school with several of them, their ability and willingness to interact with patients outside of their trial is very, shall we say, they're not comfortable. Many of the researchers that we have brought in as a part of our team, the researchers have had some difficulty in interacting with patients outside the patient to researcher relationship. And so what we're now trying to do is encouraging them again to, as they are developing their research projects, as they're developing their CERs, how are they including the actual individuals that they're planning to do the work in? And oftentimes what we find is that you'll do a better job of recruiting if you're having the folks you want to recruit at the table. If they're not at the table, there's a saying, not us without us. If you're at the table, then you'll have a better outcome, which is what we all want, right? Better outcomes. All right, to my dad. So this young man was diagnosed, as I said, at 77 years old. And so at that time, when you look at my dad, right now he is blind, he's in a wheelchair, he has sleep apnea, he has a defibrillator, he has a tube in his bladder, and he has difficulty walking. Now, if my dad were to roll in here right now, you would not know any of those things because he doesn't wear any of the things that he is, but that has been failed him. My dad has chosen to live life to its fullest, and what he chooses to do is to try to help others that have to, or that may follow him or go down the path that he has gone. And so it is very important for him to learn as much as he can to help others who may come down this path. Now, what I find very interesting is that not very many folks have the path that my dad has, but in the process of working with his primary care physician, his oncologist, they found it very challenging to work with my dad because he just wouldn't accept just what they would present to him. And so at 77, and with the other conditions that he has, the opportunities or things that he had available to him wasn't the same for someone that was, let's say, 40 years old or 50 years old. And so he challenged his oncologist, he challenged his researchers to think outside of what you would normally do. Thankfully, my dad has done well. Again, he'll be 90 years old in a couple of months, and has continued down the path of making sure that as he goes to, we have a group there in Kansas City called the Prostate Network. And basically, they are a group of survivors that meet on a monthly basis, and they talk about the different treatments, the different things that they have to go through, the issues or the concerns that they have with their loved ones, with wives and daughters and sisters, and how they have those conversations. And what is very positive about that interactions is that they have learned that through the commonality that they have with one another, they're able to strengthen one another. And so as they strengthen one another, their outcomes become better without any medicine. Well, they're all taking medicine. What I'm saying is that the medicine is not the only thing that is causing a positive outcome. It's because of the relationships that they have with one another. It's the relationships that they have with individuals who are going down those same journeys that they've been able to recognize better patient outcomes. And as researchers are recognizing that a lot of times it's not just the medicine, but it's the fellowship that folks have with one another as they go through this journey. And so as we sit here today, I would encourage each of us to continue to look for fellowships and opportunities to join with one another. So the last part of my presentation is talking about things that you all, I'm sure, already know. It's common forms, most common form of cancer in men, second to skin cancer, no symptoms, it's treatable when detected early. 1 in 6 African Americans compared to 1 in 9 in their white counterparts, and it's dual disadvantage. So as you look at that picture, and I'm one that I like to speak through pictures. So the heaviest guy in that group there is me on the right. And of course, that's my dad there in the middle. All the way to your right and my left is my oldest son. My oldest son, next to him is my youngest son, and then my nephew, and then that's my great nephew that has his hand on my shoulder. And I found that very unique in that was not staged. He just did that on his own. So what is important about here, you have 4 generations, and it is our job. It is my part of the task that I have as an advocate to make sure that my great nephew has every available treatment to him if he were to be diagnosed with this disease. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting is that in the African American community, there is a great reluctance in getting tested. Again, my dad is a prostate cancer survivor, but yet I have 2 brothers that are very reluctant to get any type of testing, whether it's a DRE, whether it's a PSA, even any type of testing. They are very reluctant because they are afraid of knowing the result. So they have a fear of knowing the result, and then there is a lack of trust in whether or not the information that they would be provided would be adequate and would be appropriate for them. As many of you know, many of the drugs that are tested in our country are tested in white men. Why do we feel that drugs that work in white men would work in everyone else? But yet that's what we have available to us. And so how do we encourage, how do we advocate for those who need to know what those opportunities are to them are made available for testing. One, we have to develop relationships. I go back to what I was speaking on early. Relationships matter. If I have developed a relationship with you, then we can have a conversation. That conversation should go beyond what my physical body is presenting. It should go to what are my sons doing. It should go to what my mom's doing, or what my sisters are doing, what my brothers are doing, or what a spouse is doing. When you develop relationships, people are more willing, more able to then speak to you in an honest and transparent way. Oftentimes, when people talk with their providers, they tell them what they want, what they think they want to hear, and not what is actually happening. And so I submit to you that in the cause and in the path and in the journey of cancer, no matter what cancer discipline or what cancer you have, that the key factor for survival and for better outcomes is relationships. And as we develop relationships, we can be able to present a form of treatment that has the best outcomes, not only for you and I, but for those to come to us generations to come. Thank you.
Do something a little funky here. So Michael is going to be doing this remotely, and we have to aim the microphone at the speaker up here.
Okay.
So let's hope it works. We're all praying. Michael?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can.
Did you just want me to start, or?
Yes, please.
Is it
Okay.
if I do a little-
Hi, my name is Michael Kvarak. I am living with metastatic breast cancer. This September will be my 4th metastatic anniversary. I apologize for not being able to be there. I had been sick for the past week and a half and felt it was much better for me to stay home. And then Danny asked if I could do this remotely. Looking at the disparity with men, and especially in an area of breast cancer, which for so long has been put out and thought of as a woman's disease. And for me, it started in 2007 when I found a lump in the left side of my chest. And I remember everyone thought it was a cyst, even the doctors. And when I went for the follow-up after having the lump removed, and the first words were, "I wish I had better news for you, Michael." I knew I was kind of going to be going down a different path. And when they talked to me and said about that, that I'm this rare case of male breast cancer, I remember sitting there, just everything shut down. The doctor kept talking, and all I kept thinking was, wait a minute. How am I having breast cancer? Women get breast cancer, not men. I had never heard of that. And that's when this journey began. As I started kind of dealing with that situation and getting used to it and being more comfortable telling people that I had breast cancer, there was a lot of embarrassment with it at first because I knew of no other man living with breast cancer. I really had no other man to talk to about what they were experiencing, to see if it was what I was experiencing was the same. I did not meet another male breast cancer survivor in person until like June of 2015, which ironically 2 months later, I was diagnosed stage 4. As I started meeting men, I remember this one who has become a very good friend of mine, he told me about his experience and about how embarrassed he was that he would not tell anyone that he had breast cancer. He was referring to the fact that he had chest cancer. What I've learned over the years is how important that connection is. I think it is much better now with organizations like the Male Breast Cancer Coalition that gets the stories of men who are living with breast cancer, and they can share and they meet and they have better communication than I had when I began. But what I also experienced that was also about the disparities that is beginning to change, which is great, but within doctors' offices, the forms that I was filling out and being asked when was my last period, am I pregnant? And I kept thinking, like, do I belong here? When I had to get mammograms, because at first I had just the left side mastectomy. And so my oncologist had me doing mammograms on my right breast. And the signage within the offices were all geared towards women. And, psychologically, you kind of sit there, and I understood it, because this is not something that's going to change overnight. But I remember sitting there feeling constantly, again, do I belong within this community? Am I going to be able to be part of it? I was very lucky in the fact that I met other women who were going through this disease, who were very helpful to me, who were my mentors, my teachers on how to deal with this disease. But, going back to it, there's still that what was lacking within my path was having another man to talk to about this. All the treatments that are prescribed to men are the exact treatments that are prescribed for women. I know, we deal with the same side effects, and I have a lot of admiration for women who are going through those wonderful hot flashes, because I have been experiencing them. And I remember one of the first times that I shared that, when I was early stage and I was still teaching elementary school. I shared with a couple of my female colleagues about going to hot flashes. And I remember one of the women who was there said to me, welcome to our world, Michael. And I remember just standing there thinking, like, I don't want to be in your world. I want to be in my own world. And yet everything from the treatment to the side effects to, how things were done were things that were done towards women. And so it was harder for me to really feel part of that path, part of this healing, until I started feeling more comfortable to speak up and to realize and say, okay, well, as a man, what do you see? And the problem is, because the population is so small, we are 1% of the diagnosis each year of the thousands of people that are diagnosed with breast cancer. And because of that, there aren't any studies out there. I know there is one right now with, and on the American side is being conducted by Dr. Sharon Giordano from MD Anderson, but it's in connection with Europe, with colleagues from Europe and men from Europe, because they did not have a big enough population here. So I understand what the situation is because of the low population, that there aren't the studies that could and should be out there to see if this is the best path for men going through this disease. I remember some years back also being part of a social media campaign, because a fellow man who was living with, at that point, metastatic breast cancer, he was being denied his medication from his insurance company because the prescribed medication was for women. And I remember being part of that and being angry about the fact that we had to sit there and try to explain to the insurance company why this man was supposed to be on this drug. That disparity has lessened, but I think it still pops up every once in a while. Another area that I'm finding that still needs work and has a lot of disparity is clinical trials, where men are shut out of a lot. TV commercials or print ads about, in my case, metastatic cancer, are all geared towards women. And part of what I'm trying to do is to get out the word that if they were to show a man in that TV commercial or in that print ad, that message that would be sent out would be amazing and would be so powerful. It is beginning to change. And as I said before, it's not something that's going to change overnight. I'm being realistic. But how it's starting to change is because our vocabulary, especially with breast cancer, is changing to where we start using the phrases women and men. Just even a year ago, when I was at ASCO representing Metaviver, and I was at a presentation, an oncologist was talking, and all the data that she had up on the screen, all the data and that she was referring to, and all the language that she was using the word women. And I remembered that at the end of it, I asked the question, and I said, in your data, were men included in this? And she said yes. And I said, well, how as a community can we put out that men are part of this data? Because I said it is so important, because if we were to change our vocabulary and use the word women and men, automatically everyone is hearing that. It becomes part of them. It becomes part of their conversation. So if you're a doctor, if you're a researcher, if you're from a pharmaceutical company, if you are from an insurance company or a patient organization, and you begin using the words women and men, it becomes part of it. And by using that phrase and knowing the power of words, disparities begin to diminish. Attitudes and beliefs will change. When we change our vocabulary, that is how it's going to happen. I also feel that how we can diminish and lessen the disparities, not only looking at, in my situation with men and women with the area of breast cancer, but also in any area of cancer, is having communication and partnerships, because that is going to lessen the disparities. Right now, as I've been advocating out for Metaviver, and I've been having the honor of meeting a lot of women and men who are living with this disease and other stage 4 cancers, but especially in breast cancer, what has been really concerning to me is also the age disparity. I have met more and more younger women in their 20s and 30s where their first diagnosis is stage 4. I mean, I know my experience. Hearing that I was stage 1 in 2007 blew me away. When I heard I was stage 4, I had the same reaction. I cannot imagine being in my 20s or my 30s and hearing that I have stage 4 cancer or stage 4 breast cancer. And we lost, on the board of Metaviver this past year, we lost this amazing, amazing woman, Monica Hill, who was only 35 and had a 4-year-old daughter. I just asked, it's like, I can't imagine leaving a 4-year-old daughter and a young husband, and only living 22 months with this diagnosis. We need to look at that disparity. When people are being diagnosed earlier and earlier with a disease that has been so long associated with an older, more mature age, that just destroys so many lives, as stage 4 cancer does in its own. More people need to be tested for the BRCA gene. My oncologist, my very first oncologist, thankfully was on top of things, and because my dad had passed away from pancreatic cancer back in the 90s, she fought to have me tested, because at first my insurance company denied me being tested for the BRCA gene, and she fought for it, and I finally got it. And I remember when I was told that I was BRCA2, I was like at first really bummed out because I felt like it was just another layer of cancer on top of me. Because I was already dealing with I just wanted to be done with cancer at that point. And now I look at it in a sense as a gift that I know, as hard as it is, because I can be more proactive than reactive. But what was also important about that was that my oncologist encouraged my mom, my brother, and my sister that they get tested. And they were all negative, thank God. But the important thing that I learned from that was that if they were able to find out, as hard as it was, that they were also BRCA2 positive, that they would then have that ammunition on their side to be more proactive. They could be then more proactive with their children, who in turn would be more aware of what they need to be looking out for. And so that they do not have to deal with disease as those of us who are finding out later on that we're BRCA, that we could have maybe looked at things a little bit differently. And so I think the power in knowledge is also a way to diminish any disparity. We also need to look at and communicate and set up partnerships with access to care. We need to look at men versus women in their care. We need to look at minority populations versus the white population. We need to look at rural versus urban, and also the financial part of that. You know, we need to look at, like for clinical trials, the financial aspect. If you are living in a rural area, as I do right now, I live in upstate New York, but yet I am in a place where my partner and I, we can drive to Boston, to Dana-Farber, for consultation with my oncologist. But there are people who can't do that. Are there ways that clinical trials can be farmed out from these wonderful cancer institutes found in, the urban areas to those in the rural areas for people to be able to partake in that? That's going to help the disparity that we see between rural and urban. Can we also have clinical trials farmed out into the minority population communities so that they have access to the same care that I have? That will lessen the disparities. And also for the fact that when it's within your when you have that access within your community, you go home after that treatment. In your own home, you're so much better to heal. You're so much more comfortable. You're with family, you're with friends. You're not in a hotel room somewhere. Those are the things that are gonna also diminish disparities. When we look at the partnerships between researchers and doctors and pharmaceutical companies and patient organizations, when we have that communication, when we have that partnership, each side learns about each other, and we hear about what can work. What would be better for me as a patient if I need to go through a clinical trial where I know the side effects may be really, really severe? And I know me as a person, I'd want to be home after that treatment. I want to be curled up on my own couch or up, in the back, looking out on the fields behind our house and heal. And all that is part of better access to care. Also communicating with our legislators, the importance and the need for continuous funding. Just recently in March, representing Metaviver with a couple of other individuals who were associated with Metaviver, I was up on Capitol Hill and we were talking to legislative offices, staff members, thanking them for their support for the areas that Metaviver was advocating for all stage 4 cancers. And one of the things that we were sharing about with them that I have learned in meeting other researchers is the need for continuous funding. That researchers do not have to worry about each year, where is the money going to be coming from? Or after 2 years, if this is done and they're on the cusp of something, where is the money going to come from? And so as a patient, I felt, which was very powerful, along with the 2 other patients that I was with, that we were talking to these staffers and talking to them that we really need to look at how we are funding research. And by being a voice for researchers on the Hill as a patient, it showed not only my concern about that, but the partnership that I have with researchers. And I have to share that was really solidified with Metaviber. We have this really great program called C2C, and it's where a patient or either another patient or a caregiver, we have a RV that was donated to, paid for Metaviber through sponsors, various sponsors. And we traveled different parts of the country, going to research institutes, cancer institutes, meeting with researchers, meeting with doctors, nurses, and so on. And I had the opportunity with my partner Tim last August to do the segment from Seattle, Washington, down to Sacramento, California. And while we were in Seattle, I had the honor of being able to go and meet with researchers at the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center. And it was amazing. For me, it was amazing to see the people who were part of my lifeline. For the researchers, and they were saying it was amazing because so rarely do they get to talk to patients. And I had one instance where one of these young researchers was talking to myself and Tim, and he was showing us on his computer his study with brain mets, and he is just going a mile a minute, and of course the information is flying way over my head. I had no idea what the hell he was saying. But what grabbed me, what held me, was his passion for what he was doing. And I remember when he finished, I said to him, David, I had no idea what you were talking about, but your passion has taken over me. And I will do everything and anything I can, any chance that I get, to talk about the importance of funding research for stage 4 cancers. That's the type of thing that needs to happen more often, because that is also going to diminish disparities in our treatment. It's no longer stage 4 brain mets. It's no longer stage 4 breast cancer, stage 4 prostate cancer, or ovarian cancer. It's Michael, it's Beth, it's Patrick, it's Judy. And there's a name with the illness. And it's somebody living in the rural area who is struggling to get a decent care program going because of where they live and their inability to access the best care that's possible, that's usually found in the more urban areas of our country. Those are the things that lessen disparities. When I was also on the Hill, we were talking about the SEER program with the NCI, the Surveillance, Epidemiology, and the End Results program. And how the government doesn't
Michael,
really
can you hear me?
have a number for the number of stage 4 people. Having that data will lessen disparities because we will know the number of people that are living with these diseases, how we can better use the money, how it can be funded better, and for promising research. Those are the ways, and I do believe that there are ways to lessen the disparities that we see within this between men and women, between minority communities and the white community. And we need to just do that with personal connections, with all of us who are part of the lifeline. We can get that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Hi, my name is Violet, and I'm a stage 4 rectal cancer survivor, for those of you who might not remember from the introductions. And when I say that, before I get into my own story, I'd like you to think about what that means, what someone like me who says I'm a stage 4 rectal cancer survivor, what's going on with me? What kind of survivorship support do you think I need based on the way I look and when I say the word survivor? So my story, I don't have any slides, I'm just gonna tell my story. I was diagnosed at age 31 at stage 4. After about a year of trying to get diagnosed, I had gone into several physicians and told them I have colorectal cancer. I can feel the tumor when I try to go poop. I can see the tumor in my poop. My poops are getting skinnier and there's a crescent in there. Constantly told, you're way too young. The youth disparity right there, they immediately don't believe you. I think a specific disparity that women face is that we're told we're crazy. I was constantly told I was crazy, literally the word. You are crazy to think you have colorectal cancer. You're a hysterical woman. They often assume that women are hiding diet issues. I was accused of hiding an eating disorder and trying to present it as cancer. And so after months and months of this, I did finally find a GI who wanted to give me a colonoscopy, but he thought it was an eating disorder too. And he said it wasn't high priority. So he said, I'm gonna give you one, but I'm not gonna get you in there soon. I got signed up for a colonoscopy in 2 months. About a month into that, in November 2016, right around the election, I was trying to go vote. And my voting facility was maybe 2 blocks from my home. And I had called into work that day because I felt so horrible anyway. But I said, I'm gonna go vote. I started walking to go vote, and I truthfully thought I was going to poop my pants when I went to go vote, and I had to turn around and go home. I did put on a few pairs of pants and go back and vote later that day, I will proudly say. But it made me realize I didn't have the health to walk 2 blocks to go vote. Something's going on. So I decided I was gonna go to the emergency room that weekend no matter what. I prepared myself, and I packed a huge bag. Probably had like a week's worth of clothes in there. I had my iPad and laptop in there. I had my work laptop so I could work if I needed to. I knew I had cancer. I knew what was going down when I got there. I get to the emergency room and I say, hey, I'm pretty sure I have stage 4 rectal cancer. I was bruised everywhere, presenting anemia. I weighed 107 pounds. I weigh 130 pounds now, so you can only imagine how thin I looked. And they immediately tried to turn me away again and told me I was insane. They made fun of how big my backpack was. Oh, you think you're gonna be here a while, huh? I said, yeah, I am. They sat me down after explaining my symptoms and spoke to me as if I'm a child, the way a kindergarten teacher speaks. Now, Violet, you do have some health problems going on, that's very clear, but it's not an emergency. You shouldn't be here today. You're taking up space for people who need immediate help. They did agree to finally, for the first time after seeing multiple physicians and saying I felt like there was a tumor in my butt, someone gave me a digital exam, finally. Immediately felt my tumor. That's all it would have taken, was a digital exam that a primary care physician could have given me at any physical I ever had, or at any time I said that I feel like there's something in my butt. When she felt that tumor, they gave me a CT scan. They walked back in from the CT scan. I'm all alone. I was single at this time. No family nearby. I'm in Washington, D.C. My closest family is in Illinois. The man walks back in the room and he goes, do you have family nearby? I said, no. And he told me I had tumors in my ovaries. I had tumors all over my liver, and I had multiple nodules in my lungs. And that I likely had a year to live, and I needed to call my family right now. So I did. But I didn't cry. I was just like, I know. And they even brought in a psychologist to say, Violet, I don't think you understand what's going on. You don't understand how severe a stage 4 diagnosis is. And I said, "Sir, my own father died of stage 4 cancer in my arms. I know what I'm about to face here. I've just been trying to get treatment this whole time. I'm excited to start chemo. Let's go." And so I did. I started chemo probably a week later. They held me in the hospital to see if my bowel was blocked for about 5 days. And then once they realized I could poop a little bit if I took 2 doses of Miralax, they thought that chemotherapy would be a better route. I started on a somewhat aggressive form of chemotherapy for that time called FOLFIRINOX, which you might know from ASCO. They've just come out with some data showing that that is maybe a better method forward for early diagnosed colorectal cancer patients. And I started responding to it very quickly. I could actually tell it was working before the CT scan because I could see it in my poop, to be frank. Pooping was easier. It was no longer an hour-long crying episode on the toilet every morning. So I could tell it was working, and everybody was getting excited. "You're going to be NED by the end of the summer, Violet. This is crazy. Can't believe it. Your tumors in your lungs are disappearing. The liver ones are getting really small. You're going to be NED by the end of the summer." Wow, okay, that's crazy, right? So I did a few rounds of that chemotherapy, and then they told me, "Okay, you responded really great. Now you have to do radiation if we want to get this out." So I went through 30 rounds of radiation right here. Don't know if anyone knows what it feels like to get a laser burning you right there, but it's not fun. And nobody told me about the side effects of that, which I'll address a little later. I agreed to them at 8:30 in the morning when I signed 1 million pieces of paper so I could do the radiation that everyone told me I needed to do or else I was going to die. Radiation's done. They're ready for surgery. I'm going to have the amazing Da Vinci robot operate on me, and they're going to get it out. I'm probably going to have an ostomy for a while. It's going to be reversible. So I'm I'm excited. Wow, not only am I going to be NED, but I'm not going to be pooping in a bag for the rest of my life either. And I believed so much that I could be NED that honestly, the poop bag was my greatest concern, the vanity around it. It was my greatest concern. And no doctor prepared me for what an ostomy was. I didn't even know. I don't know if you all know that when you have an ostomy, your intestines are actually hanging out of your stomach. I had always made up in my mind that I thought I would have a tube hanging out of me or something, because why would one know how that works? So I have my surgery and I wake up, I have the ostomy, and that's all I think is a big deal. Like, oh, I gotta learn how to live with this for a while. Nobody told me how it was gonna work. An ostomy nurse comes in and pulls me into the bathroom, and my mother, for the first time, we're going to change the bag. And I had no preparation for this from the clinical side. Lucky for me, I had found the patient community beforehand, and I had found another woman via Colon Town, an online patient group for colorectal cancer, who had an ostomy. She sent me a video of how to change a bag the night before, and I was watching it for before my surgery. So as I'm standing in this bathroom, an electric green poop is literally shooting out of my stomach across the room, like almost hitting my poor mother. I was able to grab all the parts I needed and change my own bag right there. And the nurse said, "Wow, have they really upped education here?" And I said, "No, I learned this from another patient." And I thought, wow, it's time to go home. Like, robotic surgery, I was only in there for 2 days. I was walking around, I felt great. And then they come in and give me the big surprise. "Hey, Violet, in your surgery," they also intended to remove my liver tumors. And they said, "When we got in there, it was way worse than what the scans were showing, and your liver is almost all tumors." And so basically right then told I was going to start chemotherapy 30 days after my surgery, and I was going to do it until I die. So I am now going to look like this forever. And I started the chemo. At that time, I thought, I was trying to learn so much about how the education of the disease, the science. I'm a budget analyst, and I actually went to college for English, so I don't have any real skills. I don't understand science, and I needed to know. And I kept trying to ask my doctors about it. And I started getting second opinions and going to nationally designated centers and seeing the top guy, And when I would say, "I want to know more about the science of this," usually they'd call me honey or sweetie, probably 20 times in the meeting, which don't do that to young girls. We don't like it. But they'd also always, I'd try to get them, I know I'm not going to understand the high-level biochemistry here, but I'd like to understand what's going on a little bit more. They would always give me the analogy of a car and a carburetor, and, oh, this drug's putting the block. Do I look like I know how a car works? It's not what I was looking for, and quite frankly, it's insulting. I'm not asking for a cartoon description of my cancer that's killing me. So I started getting more involved in Colon Town. And Colon Town is an online group of about 4,000 people with colorectal cancer, and it has targeted groups for different things. So they had a targeted group called Colorectal Cancer 101. It's led by other people who are diagnosed with colorectal cancer who may have happened to be a cancer researcher before. It happens. Or maybe they were a primary care physician or something, but they're able to speak to, they now have both experiences, and they're able to do patient education in a way that gets it to the layperson in the way that they want. And I started to understand what was going on with me more. I looked at my testing they had given me after my resection, and I realized they only tested me for KRAS, BRAF, and RAS. And even testing me for KRAS, they only looked at 2 little spots on the gene. So I started saying, I want to get this whole tumor sequencing done. Insurance company writes you a letter back that says, there's no value to this because your disease is likely to result in death within a year. That's what happens when we ask for that, and that often happens when we ask for liquid biopsies, if you're not familiar. You're going to die anyway. So I started working in the community and finding a way to get Caris to test me for free. And I did find out after years of thinking I was KRAS wild and that when my current chemo failed, I would likely turn to an EGFR inhibitor and get a few more years out of life there. I found out I was a KRAS mutant and I couldn't do that. It was the first time I ever cried in the doctor's office. I didn't cry when I was diagnosed. I did not cry when I found out my surgery failed, but I did cry then because I thought I did everything right. I got tested for the biomarkers I was supposed to get tested for. And I had been mentally preparing while doing FOLFOX every other week that that's going to fail at some point, and then I'm probably going to get a couple years out of Vectibix. And I felt like I had this, and then after that I might get some out of Lone Surf or something, and then maybe the right trial will present. And I felt like they took that board of planning and just chopped it, and I just lost 5 years or something. And then I started getting back into Colon Town, and we actually have these clinical trial groups that based on what type of biomarker you have, you get put in the group. So we have a BRAF group, and at first we only had the ones associated with colorectal cancer. But as we all started getting our whole tumor sequencing, and some people are finding out they're HER2 positive, or some people are finding out they have the NTRK fusions. We started creating other groups. So we now have people with colorectal cancer who find out they're HER2 and get into breast cancer, or trials that were probably initially intended to be for a breast cancer patient, start using those drugs and see responses. And I found out that the type of KRAS mutation I have is incredibly rare, and that maybe EGFRs will work on me. I had gone to probably 5 oncologists at that point who never brought that up to me, never told me I was only the 13th person Caris tested with my type of KRAS mutation. They were treating me as if I were one of the 95% who mutate at 12 and 13. So when I was looking for trials, I was looking for those. I was looking for the wrong trials, So without these patient groups to kind of address some of the blocks that these health disparities put on us, I'd probably be dead already. And now I have promise. I don't have any kind of mutation that really opens me up to immunotherapy. It's happening in the colorectal cancer community. People with MSI status are, they can do immunotherapy now. And I now have opportunities for me through these groups to get into trials that may possibly save my life, if anything, extend them or give me a chance. And I hope that people can realize the promise these groups have. I've come in, that same oncologist that called me honey and sweetie multiple times and explained cancer to me like a car. I brought in a paper about one woman who had the same mutation as me, and she did Vectibix and responded. And he told me, I don't like it when patients do this. Get off Dr. Google. I don't like Colon Town. I'm tired of the questions you bring in. And I mean, I just don't understand why you don't want to work, why he doesn't want to work with us. I don't want to say you. There is so much promise that can come out of the intersection of these communities. And we're starting to have it in Colontown, a separate, more stood-up charity. Colontown is very similar to Metaviver. It's volunteer and patient-led. Fight Colorectal Cancer curates a stage 4 microsatellite stable clinical trial finder for colorectal cancer patients. And they have a research and advocacy training program called RATS that some of you may have heard of. And they curate the trial finder. So you don't have to go to a million websites and find it. And you don't have to go to cancer.gov and try to navigate that website. You can type in what stage you are, rectal, blah, 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 and every trial available will pop up for you. And now the strategic partnership we have from that is that we have these curated groups in Colontown where we share our trial progress. Like, we just had this big thing come out at ASCO about this Amgen vaccine that's working for some KRAS mutants. And it wasn't a surprise to any of us because we have 6 or 7 people in the trial who update us on their progress every day. And there's so much promise there in working together, and I really hope people understand that. And I hope, too, that through this, you can really understand, and I'm very grateful to be invited today to something that's usually a breast cancer conference. There's a lot more commonalities between me and a stage 4 breast cancer patient than there is between a stage 1, 2, or even 3 colorectal cancer patient. And to be frank, even a stage 4 one who became NED really fast. If I would have been NED after that surgery, the experience is not the same, you know? Their experience is a little more similar to a stage 3 person at this time. Maybe they have more fear of recurrence, but they did chemo, they had surgery, and now they're better. And so I don't always identify with them. When I go to support groups just for colon cancer, it's usually full of that, and they're all talking about how hard life after cancer is. And I'm just sitting here hoping and praying that my 10% chance of getting there ever happens, you know? So we're a certain special community, and I think rather than thinking or identifying in the way that you're a stage 4 metastatic, breast cancer patient, you're just metastatic, and especially those of us who are on treatment for life. We're the ones that need to join together, and we can actually find out more. Like I said, we have these HER2 people who are now responding, which is crazy, and I never would have thought to be tested for HER2 when I was first diagnosed. I was tested, I don't have it, but it's just really there's a lot of potential there. And I hope we all start talking more and hanging out more and collaborating more, and I hope that the researchers and doctors do as well. Something we just started doing in Colontown is inviting researchers into those same groups. So now they're coming in and posting trials that might be good for us and explaining why some of us can't get in or why it wouldn't work for us or help us get screened. And even in our stoma group, we now have a stoma nurse. In our nutrition group, we have a nutritionist. And these partnerships are really and connections are really presenting places or opportunities in care that never would have existed before. If I had only pursued the treatments that doctors had, suggested to me, I would be on I don't know if I would be alive. And I would definitely be so depressed right now thinking that there's zero chance of this ever getting better. And I know there's a very low chance, I'm no fool. But I would probably succumb to the depression of a doctor telling me that there's nothing out there for you and you're gonna do chemo until you die. Something else they didn't prepare me for when I had radiation was that it would take away all sexual function for me. So they did warn me it might make me infertile, and I really didn't care. But nobody told me I could never have sex again. And they made that choice for me. Oh, she's dying, she'd rather be alive. You know what, if you guys would have told me that, I probably would have said, don't do the radiation. I'm gonna die either way, and I'm only gonna be alive for 5 years, and I'm 31. I'd probably like to have sex. But some old men in white coats made that decision for me. And now I've lost multiple love languages that I will never have again. And I could have been using vaginal dilators that whole time, and no one brought it up to me. So I think it's very important as a takeaway for providers. When you look at people and you see what they look like and how healthy they might be, or you make an assumption about their diagnosis that they might be dead in X amount of time, you really need to talk to them about the options that are there and the realities. I think I made some of those choices that have left me this way because they gave me too much hope that I would be in ED someday. And that might sound weird. Everybody wants to feel like that. But they made it seem like it was going to be so easy. And I was ready to go into this aggressive treatment to get there. And in hindsight, I think the last few years of my life probably would have been better had I not made those choices. And I didn't even know they were choices at the time. I was just doing what people told me I had to do if I don't want to die in a week. And so, you know, just to close, I hope people kind of step away and understand the word survivor means a lot of different things, right? And the things we need might be very specific, and we don't know we need them when we're first diagnosed. We have no idea what we need. We need you to bring it up to us. Unfortunately, right now, we only have other patients helping us in that way, and we can do better. Thank you.